Hello, class. Today we will be reading The Origin of Species. And does anyone remember who wrote The Origin of Species? We were just talking about him about 2 days ago. His name is what? Very good. His name is Charles Darwin. And this is the famous book that's written in a lot of textbooks. And they talk about it a lot. It's called The Origin of Species. And it was one of Charles Darwin's writings that basically revolutionized the scientific world back in his days. So Charles Darwin grew up in the 19th century. So during that time, there was a lot of warfare. The church censored a lot of scientific development. But this here is the book that caused a lot of controversy, but also got a lot of people thinking. So we will be reading a paragraph out of this book in order to kind of start us off because we're learning about evolution and its mechanisms and how it occurs. Okay, so here we go. When we compare the individuals of the same variety or subvariety of our older cultivated plants and animals, one of the first points which strikes us is that they generally differ more from each other than do the individuals of any one species or variety in a state of nature. And if we reflect on the vast diversity of the plants and animals which have been cultivated and which have varied during all ages under the most difficult climates, not difficult, under the most different climates and treatment, we are driven to conclude that this great variability is due to our domestic productions having been raised under conditions of life not so uniform as and somewhat different from those to which the parent species have been exposed under nature. So what does this all mean? In this little quote here, Darwin is saying that when he was on his trip to the Galapagos, okay, and that's what we were learning about in the textbook. They were telling us about how Darwin traveled around the world in the Beagle. So when Darwin was going on his trip around the world, he would eventually end up on the Galapagos Islands, where he would always have a pen and paper and would write down his observations of both plants and animals, their differences, their similarities, and how they were able to survive in their environment. For instance, Darwin saw tortoises on the Galapagos that had a shape of a turtle. Their turtle shell was a little shape different, so turtles were able to reach up and grab lettuce, vegetation from higher trees. Now, why might that be? Why would they change? Darwin brought all these observations back. And that's how, in our textbook, they're talking about how he is the father of basically modern evolution. Darwin was the focal point, the one who broke the ground, like when you're farming, seers. And he paved the way for scientists to really develop a new thought process, a new understanding of how organisms, both animals and plants, changed. Now, he did not know how these changes came to be about, because as we read in the textbook, that Darwin knew that offspring got their traits from their parents, but he did not know the mechanism by which that occurred. So text is text. We're reading about Darwin. We know that he was not able to understand a couple things, but he was able to lay the ground for what we know as the theory of evolution. Now, what does this mean to me? Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species. How do I feel about it? What does it tell me as a biology teacher? Darwin was a man ahead of his time. He was very intelligent. Like I said earlier, during the time which he was living in, which was the 19th century, so the 1800s, Darwin was kind of in a battle with the church. They censored a lot of scientific research and development, so Darwin was not able to publish his work. But through his observations, through what he considered his own experiments, where Darwin would not only look at these animals that were out in the wild, he would look at pigeons and other animals that people had kept in Europe. And it was through all these observations that Darwin was actually able to conclude that changes in animal does occur, and it occurs because animals are always striving to live. And these changes are not on purpose. It is caused by natural selection. Nature selects animals. Humans don't. But because we domesticated animals, we looked at animals, we liked if they were pretty, or we liked the brand of dog that were there, we would try to select for those animals. We would try to breed other animals that had those same characteristics, and then keep those animals in our homes. And this is what Darwin was trying to do. And how I feel about this is, I feel that Darwin contributed to the scientific community more than anyone has ever done. He created a pathway, a development where people now know that we as humans are changing the world we live in, and we don't even realize it. We affect animals, we affect plants, the way they live, the way they're able to survive. We affect ourselves. So how do I feel about Darwin? I feel that he was a pioneer, the father of modern evolution, and he paved the way for all of us to learn science, to understand that these mechanisms are still occurring. Now, text to the world. How does evolution, and what does it matter to the world? How do we relate it to the world? Well, the world uses much of what Darwin has learned in this book, The Origin of Species, and in textbooks. We use evolution to explain many things, how animals and plants are evolving, but not just them, bacteria, viruses. And specifically in this passage, Darwin's talking about dogs and pigeons and things that humans keep as pets, that we purposely breed those type of animals to be in our homes. It is because Darwin researched this that we know that these things occur, that we know that animals, that variety of animals are changing because of what humans are doing. Animals in the wild, they are less different than the animals we keep and the animals we cultivate and the animals that we have in our homes, the plants that we grow. In today's world, we have a lot of genetically modified plants and animals. Now, those plants and animals, we have not learned yet if they are safe or not, but one thing we do know is they have changed the world. New diseases may arise. New bacteria will grow. New viruses will begin to appear. So, how does evolution affect the world? It affects the world in every way possible. What we eat, what we keep as pets, what tries to attack us, what makes us sick, and everything. So by Darwin publishing this book, laying out the foundations that animals are changing, plants are changing, bacteria, viruses, fungus, everything is changing, we now realize that that change is or can be beneficial, but it also could be detrimental. And thus, this text to the world is implementing that through learning that the differences of animals and plants and everything else is changing. We must realize and be careful of what we do, how we change the world, because we as humans have caused much change. And although we have been not really looking at it in that possible sense, we must realize that the change in the world is affecting our future.